You deserved everything you got. This is a union city.
That is a Philadelphia tradition.
Seize the means of podcasting.
Oh God, the boss has crushed us.
Let me tell you one thing else.
In oldie-timey times,
The pleasure of the flesh is in solidarity.
we will not raw dog reality for that one.
It's going to be wholly unprofessional.
The Scab Buster.
What have we become?
Keep together strong. Let that be your mantra.
Solidarity. Solidarity forever.
Hello and welcome to the Labor John podcast, where in the words of the Gaviner George Wallace, gay now, gay tomorrow, and gay forever. Happy June, everybody. My name is Young Sam James. This is the Labor John podcast, and I'm joined by one of my goodest friends in the whole wide world,
I'm Gabe.
Gabe.
Happy Pride, Sam.
Happy Pride. Happy Pride. Throw a brick at a cop. Let's go. Woo! That was not an actionable threat. And today we're going to learn about something very special. What are we going to learn about today, Gabe?
So today we're going to learn about the 1969 Philadelphia hotel workers strike.
Oh, damn. Okay.
It's I realize this is an industry we haven't. Well, you talked about it with the Trump Taj Mahal.
Yeah.
First, we need to learn what is a hotel.
Oh, good.
So people travel from point A to point B, and during that journey, depending on the length of the journey, they might need to stop somewhere to rest or eat, or drink, or have affairs.
Oh, Jesus.
And so that the places where they would do that initially were inns or taverns. But I guess, so Webster's dictionary defines a hotel as an establishment that provides lodging and usually meals, entertainment, and various personal services for the public. Personal services is odd. I'm not sure I'm comfortable with that phrasing, but
I mean, you just said affairs. You said people will be having
this
affairs.
Is true. But that's not being provided by the hotel.
You don't know that, Gabe.
I don't know. That's true. There's a certain tax bracket of hotel where I'm sure that is a service provided.
When's the last time you were in a Holiday Inn, Gabe? It's been a while, hasn't it?
It has been. I don't know if I've ever stayed in an actual Holiday Inn as opposed to a Holiday Inn Express. That I don't know if I've ever seen a true, pure Holiday Inn.
Oh, God.
I don't know if they exist. Okay, but we're talking about Philadelphia. So we're going to skip ahead the 3,000 or 4,000 years of the development of hotels.
Appreciate it.
Yeah, so the tourism industry in Philly actually, the hotel industry started very early, mostly because we were the center of the Continental Congress, or we had the Continental Congress here, so we had people coming and visiting the city often. During the Revolutionary period, we were also a major trade hub, so people would come and stay.
Well, Benny Franks needed some place to put his concubines.
Yes, exactly. So. When he was importing them from France. And so usually they would stay in taverns or inns, and these were bar on the first floor, couple of spare rooms up above. You could get a hot meal and some beer.
Oh, God, that sounds great right now.
Honestly, yeah. And there were, even in the 1700s, there were different price points. So you could stay in a straw covered sty and have a bottle or have a cup of beer thrown on you. And that might be a couple pennies. Or you could get a nice room and have food brought up to you.
Okay.
That was the scale of what was available.
Mm-hmm.
But by the early 1800s, they started to get actually formalized into an institution. Mm-hmm. And you started to have
solidarity.
Shit. God damn it. I didn't mean to do that. I was trying to move my screen up.
So you started to get actual purpose-built hotels that were larger buildings, had multiple rooms,
Oh god.
and were designed specifically to provide accommodations to large amounts of people at a time.
Okay, solidarity.
Yeah, solidarity.
Will no one rid me of this turbulent soundboard?
And with that, they also started getting much fancier, and they started hiring like fancy architects to get everything built.
Ooh.
So on screen right now, we have 3 very fancy hotels. We have the Girard House, the La Pierre House, and the Continental House.
Ooh. I wonder how the breakfast is.
Yes. So the Continental was actually designed by John MacArthur Jr., who also designed City Hall.
Really?
Okay. And the main entrance to the Continental was designed by Frank Furness, who did all of the Pennsylvania Railroad's buildings and like half of the mansions in Germantown.
Wow.
So yeah, they got fancy. And even then, it's still, if you look at it, it's just a big square.
It's just, it looks like a prison, honestly.
And a little bit, yeah. But it's a fancy square.
It's a fancy prison.
Yeah. If that's not commentary on hotels. So
everybody should have a mobile home, Gabe. RVs everywhere.
Designed by Frank Furness. So I need my mobile home to have like a giant marble facade. Takes 2 18-wheelers to transport it. So 19th century hotels started to get fancier, started to get bigger, and you started to see more of tourism as an actual industry, and like people would go and stay in these fancy hotels, and you'd be expected to have these like nice big fancy dinners there. The food, or they were generally hiring like famous chefs. It was always a very big to do. And so when you get into the 1900s, they started to get even bigger and started to turn into like almost skyscrapers. And as much of a skyscraper as you can have in Philly, because Billy Penn.
There we go.
Which we should have never built above him. That is man's greatest hubris.
Sacrilegious.
But so one of the like fanciest hotels in Philly, and kind of the core of the industry, especially early on, was the Bellevue Stratford.
Hey, that's a
Still
familiar
exists.
hotel, everybody.
Yeah. Which still dominates South Broad Street.
Yeah.
Has over 1,000 guest rooms. It was built in 1906, I believe, with flush toilets.
Ooh.
Which was very fancy. And flush toilets in each room. It also had a rooftop garden that was accessible year-round. And I believe it was enclosed partially, so you could go in and there'd be like a greenhouse, but I'm not positive on that. The architecture of the Bellevue Stratford and all of these hotels, I had to like really make sure that I don't go down that rabbit hole. Otherwise, we're going to be here for another 6 hours.
I know, Gabe. I know you.
I know. But very importantly for the tourism industry in Philly, hotels started to be used for conventions. And this was it's kind of an outgrowth of how the tourism or how the accommodations industry in Philly started, because like it was literally the Constitutional Convention in Philadelphia, or the Continental Congress was just a special kind of convention.
Sure. Or just a few less ferries.
Yeah. I mean, we don't know.
I mean, what did Adams do behind closed doors?
Why do you think Franklin always had his fur hat on? There's some shit going on. No, they just drank like literally their body weight in Jamaican rum every day. But,
all right, which one of us is Rainbow Dash this week? Why do I know that? My knowledge exists somewhere in between knowing a name of a My Little Pony and knowing that the Belfer Stratford was the site of the Legionnaire's disease outbreak.
Mm-hmm.
So this is quality Catholic education, Gabe.
Yep. And I always thought Legionnaire's disease was the French Foreign Legion. It's so much less cool that it was the American Legion's convention. Like
that was like in 72 or 76, right?
I think it was 76. Yeah.
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah, and it was the air conditioning system was moldy and gave everyone. It was like 100 plus cases of Legionnaire's disease. So, proud Philadelphia moments.
I know. Isn't that sad that you think of like one of our most imposing buildings is just the site of a harp, and like that, and also the Philadelphia, what was it 1913 parade or something like that?
The 1919 Victory Parade.
There we go, Gabe.
During the flu pandemic.
Yep.
Yep. When we created one of the worst super spreader events.
That's Philly pride, baby.
Yep. And like even then, they were telling people to mask, and everyone was like, "No, fuck it,
nah."
Yeah,
it's tyranny. It's tyranny, Gabe.
It is.
It's tyranny. Face coverings are tyranny.
And they were, well, when they actually had masking mandates during the Spanish flu, they were like strict about it, and you could get arrested, or there were instances, if I remember correctly, there were instances of people being beaten by cops for not wearing a mask.
For once, I'm on the cop side.
Yeah. When they're like, if you're enforcing public health measures, then sure. Yeah. We need public health Stalin to come and enforce it. Okay, so getting back to conventions.
Yeah.
The Philadelphia started to become a hub for basically like all of these big organizations or corporations, like large societies, would meet in various cities across the US. Philly was a very popular destination because it was the hub of the Pennsylvania Railroad.
Yeah.
And it was also like fairly equidistant on the East Coast. So people would come from New York or DC or Chicago, and you could easily get to Philadelphia. And that started to become a big business, and it's kind of like a symbiotic relationship with the hotels, where the hotels would get bigger and fancier, and then they could host bigger and fancier conventions, and then the conventions would get bigger and fancier, and then the hotels would have to get bigger to accommodate.
I love it.
So by 1969, you had Bellevue Stratford on South Street, the Benjamin Franklin on 8th and Chestnut. This is also the Benjamin Franklin is the hotel that refused to provide accommodations to the Dodgers because they didn't want Jackie Robinson to come in.
What?
Yep. Another
Philly. What are we doing?
Another proud Philadelphia hotel moment. If I remember correctly, the Dodgers actually ended up at the Warwick in Rittenhouse. And then there's also the Adelphia, which we have a picture of, and the Drake, which is in Center City. So they all had very fancy restaurants. They were very hoity-toity. And each hotel also, this was before you had like big hotel chains. So there were some like I don't really want to call them chains. They were like associated hotels. Like that Bellevue Stratford one is Bellevue Stratford and Ritz-Carlton in New York, and another one. And there were, so you had hotels that were associated with each other, but each one was like its own
thing.
Unique, and they tried to cultivate that own like unique experience. So if you were going into Philly, you could just say like, "Oh, I'm staying at the Drake or the Adelphia."
Oh, this is the blue. I'm staying at the Days Inn.
Yeah. Well, eventually we'll get to all of the hotels that went on strike, and they were not all this fancy. But so we have big fancy institutions that look pretty on the outside, but all of those require people to work.
I am from Barcelona.
I didn't find any instances of Spanish hotel workers in this strike. There was one man with the most Polish name in the world, and we'll get to share a quote from him later.
I can't wait.
I had to look up a Wikipedia pronunciation guide for it, and it turns out his last name means mushroom in Polish.
That makes sense.
Yeah. So working conditions in these hotels. I wasn't able to find much about Philly specifically, but the New York and New Jersey Hotel and Gaming Trades Council has a very thorough write-up on their website about the history of hotel work. And it's probably safe to assume that conditions in Philly were the same or possibly worse as what they were in New York.
Yeah.
Judging by how the rest of Philly's labor history tends to go.
Yeah. It tracks.
Yeah. So prior to unionization in the 30s, New York hotel maids were expected to work 60 to 72-hour weeks.
Damn.
Usually making about $7 a week.
Damn.
Yeah. No sick time, no overtime, no holidays. And to get the job, you'd have to pay a job shark for the privilege of getting you through the door.
Jesus Christ.
Yeah.
Honestly, I know I'm kind of venturing to the end of this episode, but things have not gotten better for hotel maids. Really.
Yeah. Well,
oh God, here we go.
Once we start getting into the pay tables, and yeah, you know how we keep running into the issue that throughout all of labor history, people have just been fighting for $15 an hour? Yeah.
Yeah.
So
since ancient Rome.
Yeah.
Yeah, we're getting there, Gabe.
By 1967, average hourly wage for non-tipped hotel workers in a metropolitan area of the northeast of the United States was $1.86, which is about $17 today for men, $1.57 for women. Tipped positions, it was $1.32, which is about $12.50 today for men, and $1.06 for women, which is about $10 today. So I will say by the 60s, they were, at least on paper, down to 40-hour work weeks. Then I get the feeling that was not necessarily the actual situation on the ground, but at least in theory, they were working 40-hour weeks. Because, I mean, today, theoretically you're working a 40-hour week, but that's definitely not the case.
Yeah.
But you were still busting your ass, trying to keep hundreds of rooms cleaned while every like rich person on the East Coast was showing up and getting drunk, having affairs, and going to conventions.
That sounds so much fun.
And even though the other part of it is having all of the hotels basically become skyscrapers, that while there were like service elevators and you weren't walking up and down all of the stairs all of the time, you're still going through and cleaning multiple rooms on multiple floors, day in and day out. And so after a while, you'd probably want some better wages or better conditions. And that's when they started unionizing. I can't find when the Philadelphia local was founded, but the Hotel Employees and Restaurant Employees Union, or HERE, was founded in 1890.
Wow. I didn't know they were around that long.
They're one of the older AFL unions, surprisingly.
Okay.
And by 1969, the hotels in Philly, or most of the hotels in Philly, were organized under Local 568, which represented workers at 37 hotels in the area, covering about 4,000 workers in total.
Okay.
And judging, again, I couldn't find hard numbers for Philly specifically, but judging by trends across the country, we can probably assume a large number of them were women. And despite having a union contract, we're still working long hours with pretty bad wages. And we'll get into that in a second.
And their boss keeps mentioning the war, Gabe.
Yeah, I know.
What the hell? Specifically told him not to mention the war. And
his boss, or the boss's wife, whose laugh sounds like you're machine gunning a bunch of baby seals.
Oh my God. What?
I think that was the quote. It's been a while since I watched Fawlty Towers.
What? That's a hell of a quote just to ad-lib, Gabe.
Mm-hmm.
That's a hell of a quote, bud.
Anyway, moving on. We need to watch or do a viewing of Fawlty Towers at some point.
Well, how many of these hotels had starling inspectors as well?
That is a very good question. The European starling was introduced to North America at this point. So
thank you, Gabe. Thank you for that.
Well, there was one absolutely insane man who was convinced that God's own country of America must include every species of bird mentioned in Shakespeare. And so he introduced starlings to North America, who became an invasive species.
Is that how we got starlings?
Uh-huh.
Damn.
At least according to Quite Interesting, the panel show.
Gabe.
I'm inclined to believe Stephen Fry. So
all right.
Okay, so 1969. Contract negotiations are underway for 1,400 workers at 14 of the major hotels in Philly, which are the 14 hotels you can see on the screen today, or here now.
At this point in time?
At this point in time.
Okay.
At current date. So they'd been dealing with low wages for a while, and the rank and file of Local 568 was starting to get kind of pissed off about that.
Good.
Their contract was due to expire on October 1st, but by the end of May, there was already a rank and file caucus complaining that the union leadership had basically done nothing to fight for better wages. The president of Local 568 was a guy named Larry Stoltz. He'd been president for 27 years. And a rank and file, they created a caucus called the Committee for a Better Contract. And they started taking out newspaper ads, only in the Daily News, from what I could find, but basically calling on 568 members to start pressuring their union leadership to actually do something. So that was the background going into the negotiations, which seemed to have begun late in the summer. I couldn't find a hard date on when they started, but by September of 69, they were ongoing. And the Committee for a Better Contract published an open letter in the Daily News, again calling out the president, the president, Local 568's president, not Nixon.
We're calling out Nixon.
Yeah.
We should still call out Nixon.
I mean, we should. So in that letter, they pointed out that hotel maids were making $56.20 a week, which is about $493 today. So less than $2,000 a month.
Yeah.
And that wasn't just low overall. It was actually lower than other hotel worker contracts in Philly.
Oh,
because there were other hotels in the area organized under a different AFL-CIO union. Their maids were making $67 a week, which is $588 today. So almost $100 more.
Yeah.
Or $100 equivalent today. Over $10 more in 1969.
Yeah.
So that was pissing people off. And it's hard to tell if this was just a negotiating tactic that they figured it was a good starting point, or if there was enough rank and file pressure that leadership felt they needed to go big. But they started asking for a minimum wage of $2 an hour across the hotel industry, which right now, or going into the negotiations, the minimum wage was $1.40. So they wanted a 60-cent raise. It looks like the average wage or the average raise in previous contracts was 4%, because that's what the Committee for a Better Contract kept complaining about, that they would just get 4% raises every year.
Yeah.
And that was barely keeping up with inflation.
Yeah. Doesn't work like that.
Yeah. So they wanted a $17.57 or a $2 an hour minimum wage, which is the equivalent of $17.57 today. Which is still like barely a livable wage, but at least something.
Yeah.
And the Hotel and Motor Inn Association of Philadelphia countered with $1.70 an hour. So 30 cents less, which is not great. And at this point, federal negotiators were already involved. They had a guy named William Cherry who was overseeing all of these negotiations. And that was supposed to smooth everything over and make it all go a lot faster. But basically both sides were completely refusing to budge. And on top of that, there was a kind of like cloud hanging over everything that the major convention season in Philly started in October.
Uh-oh. Here comes
Yeah.
Comic-Con.
Yeah, basically, yeah. But these are mostly like, it was the
Hoity-toity conventions.
American Metals Association
Oh, okay.
had, if I remember correctly, that's who was coming. And we'll get into that in a little bit. But
All right.
yeah, they were expecting to have like thousands and thousands of people coming through the city throughout October and into November and whatnot. So convention season was fast approaching. They wanted to get this resolved quickly, but neither side was willing to budge at all. So on September 30th, both sides met at the U.S. District Court at 11 a.m. and went into 10 hours of negotiations.
Wow. Okay.
After those 10 hours, they adjourned without any progress. The hotel owners had offered a 48-hour contract extension. Because the other issue here is that it wasn't just the hotel workers contract that was up. It was also contracts for restaurant staff, and there was one other group, but it was mostly restaurant staff. They were a separate union, but contracts were due on the same day. And so they were negotiating with them separately while also negotiating with the hotel employees. And they wanted a 48, my guess is that they wanted a 48-hour extension so that they didn't accidentally trigger a simultaneous strike.
There we go.
From both restaurant and hotel staff. I can't say that for certain, but that I'm going to guess that was their tactic.
Yeah.
It was for the banquet hall employees as well. So restaurant and banquet hall staff.
Oh, okay.
So union rejected the extension, and at 12:01 a.m., October 1st, 1969, 1,400 hotel workers walked out.
Yeah.
And went on strike. The hotels responded by implementing their emergency services plan.
Oh,
which,
what is that?
Basically, management had to figure out how to run a hotel with like a tenth of the staff. So they were able to keep the lights on. They kept the elevators running and the telephone switchboards operating.
Okay.
But guests had to make their own beds, change their own linens, and all of the restaurants, dining halls, and bars were closed.
Wow.
Which led to some very grumpy convention guests. So it started in the middle of the annual convention of the American Academy of General Practice, which brought in hundreds of doctors and their spouses to Philly. And they interviewed one doctor who was very grumpy about having to deal with all of this. But then also had some labor solidarity, sort of, because he finished it by saying, like, what would it look like if we doctors went on strike? And then just grumpily went into the hotel.
Sure. Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So there were also a lot of charity dinners that were supposed to be happening at this time. So the United Funds charity dinner was supposed to happen at the Bellevue Stratford that weekend, but they had to cancel. And then there were, like I was saying, there was also a bunch of conventions planned for the rest of October, which would not only bring in a bunch of people for the hotel and bring in a bunch of profit for the hotels, it would also bring in a huge amount of tax revenue for the whole rest of the city.
Yeah.
And all of the bars and restaurants around the hotels relied on those people coming for a large chunk of their clientele for the month of October.
True.
So the Convention and Tourist Bureau that promoted Philly's tourism industry was really, really desperate to find a solution to keep the money flowing. Their president suggested that they could host the convention, or they could host banquets in the Civic Center, which is now the Perlman Center for Advanced Medicine at University of Pennsylvania.
Oh, okay.
But before that was a basically kind of like the convention hall today.
Yeah.
But it was built for the Centennial exhibition, if I remember correctly, and was like just a giant event space that they used for everything from hockey games to like big banquets, and it was just a big general purpose space.
Cool.
But it was publicly owned by the city, and private organizations couldn't say that they would just use it. You had to like request from the city permission to use it.
Yeah.
So he basically, or the mayor, James H.J. Tate, responded to that by basically saying, like, you don't have authority to say that you're going to use this, so why are you making promises?
Fair play.
Yeah. And Mayor Tate was an interesting character who was fairly pro-labor he was like the kind of Great Society Democrat of the 60s. So it's ostensibly pro-labor for the most part.
Yeah.
He provided Local 568's president with a big award on Union Label Day, which used to be a holiday, and declared that he was pro-labor because it was a just cause. Conditional support to William H.J. Tate.
Yeah.
He, at least in this story, he doesn't seem bad. I haven't looked that far into him. I'm sure there's some horrible shit.
Yes. Let's paint the guy in a good light for now, Gabe.
Yeah.
Until we get to the next episode.
He was still a mayor in Philly in the 60s. So yeah. But yeah, he basically said that he didn't have any plans to open the Civic Center, and then chastised the president of the tourism board and said he was asked if he thinks that if Abe Rosen, the president of the tourism board, was a scab. And he was like, I don't think he's a scab. I just don't think he knows any better.
Oh, bless his heart.
Yeah, basically. He's not a scab. He's just the dumbass. It's fine. So everyone was freaking out, trying to figure out how to save the tourism season, keep everything open. And so first day of the strike, while everyone's out on the picket lines, the hotels come back to negotiations, and they say they're willing to start again. They want to get back to it. But that first day of negotiations after the strike only lasted 90 minutes because neither side. Yeah.
That's a bit of a difference between 10 hours.
Yes. Because again, the union wasn't willing to back down.
Good.
Because their workers needed money, and the hotel association was basically unwilling to actually negotiate at all.
Yeah.
I will say at this point, the hotel association was sending in their lawyers to do all of the negotiation with them.
Mm-hmm.
So
progress. We're getting a lot of shit done now, Gabe.
Oh yeah,
lawyers are in it.
Mm-hmm.
So they were asking for, they offered them $1.70, you said?
Yes.
And they were okay. All right. And they wanted $2?
Yeah, the union was demanding $2.
Okay.
So they wanted the union wanted a 60-cent raise. They were being offered a 30-cent raise.
Yeah. Okay.
So Mayor Tate decided to step in at this point.
There we go.
And said that he would help arbitrate in the hopes of finding a quick solution. So, but while all of that was going on, within the union, there was still that rank and file caucus that was not happy with Larry Stoltz. So Tony Cianfrani, a bellhop at the Sheraton and the chairman of the Committee for a Better Contract, put out a half-page ad in the Daily News attacking Stoltz for being asleep for 27 years. And basically in that...
It's a good line.
Yeah. Basically in that giant ad, he lays out how Stoltz allowed their wages to stagnate.
Yeah.
And also laid out that once the contract fight is over, that the members of Local 568 need to take a long, hard look at their president and decide if that's who they want in their leadership. So he also argued that while Stoltz had finally recognized that hotel workers needed a raise, it was basically too little, too late. And the contract wouldn't even have grievance procedures to demand a wage increase as inflation went up. So he was also recognizing that no matter what came out of these negotiations, they were going to be locked into that contract regardless of what the economy does.
Yeah.
And I can't say for certain, but my guess is that the steadfast refusal to budge from a $2 minimum or $2 minimum wage was probably because of pressure from this committee that
Sure.
the leadership knew that they had to deliver, which I won't get into the politics of Local 568 because I don't know it, but I'm generally willing to err on the side of rank and file caucuses, usually.
Yeah.
But especially if they're rank and file caucuses that are demanding more for the membership.
Yeah.
So
Gabe.
Now the Mayor Tate brought the president of the Hotel and Motor Inn Association, a guy named Joseph Honig,
Okay.
and Larry Stoltz, brought them into actual negotiations with each other. And Larry Honig was the chairman of the Hotel Motor Inn Association's Labor Committee. So
Okay.
still, he was the one who actually had like some level of decision-making power. He wasn't the clerk for the lawyer hired by a lawyer hired by an attorney for the Hotel Motor Inn Association. So the mayor got as many actual decision makers in a room as he could, and decided that like they're just going to hash it out and figure out what the hell to do with this.
You think every time something came up in the contract negotiations, Larry Stoltz would just be like, "Okay,
Probably.
Sybil, where is Sybil? Okay,
Okay.
you want the bill?
I was trying
I don't
to
want the bill. I own the place. Goddamn, Gabe, we can go all night with the fucking faulty towers, baby."
I was trying to figure out how to do a Donde está el Generalissimo joke in this. But anyway, so Mayor Tate thought that he had this brilliant plan, get everyone in a room together, force them to actually negotiate. What ended up happening was Joseph Honig asked Stoltz, what would it take to settle the strike? Stoltz replied, give us the $2 an hour minimum now. Honig replied, well, they've been out a day. They might as well be out a year.
Whoa. All right, Joe.
Yeah.
Is
So
that the game you want to play?
Well, that pissed Stoltz off, who then walked out of negotiations. The federal mediator asked them to wait in his office. They went over to the office, waited there for 10 minutes. At that point, the mediator came back in and said that there was nothing he could do because the hotel owners weren't willing to budge either.
Jeez.
So after this was the third day of the strike, and they called off negotiations at that point. So Conventions Bureau, getting back to them, was getting even more concerned as the strike continued to go on without any chance of, or any apparent chance of, resolution. They estimated there was about $5 million in revenue at risk. And that was just from the convention junket in October. So if the strike went beyond October, they were really in trouble. The biggest convention they had upcoming was the American Society for Metals. No clue what that was. I'll be honest, I did not care enough to research what the American Society for Metals was.
Oh, damn. Throwing shade.
But they were expected to bring 18,000 people to Philadelphia.
Wow.
Between October 13th and 16th.
Maybe you should look into them, Gabe.
Yeah. I probably should have. I'm assuming it's a bunch of metal manufacturing organizations.
Yeah.
At first I thought it was like more of a scientific group, but you wouldn't have 18,000 people for a metallurgical science conference.
Maybe.
I don't
know, Gabe. This is Philadelphia in the 60s. Anything.
This is true. This was when they were designing the metallurgy for the batteries to chuck at Santa.
There we go.
So this is very important technological developments here. So Mayor Tate then announced that if the strike wasn't resolved by midnight on Friday, October 3rd, he would force arbitration in order to find a resolution. So he was starting to get even more concerned because he was getting pressure by the Tourism Bureau.
Yeah.
And City Council even started getting involved. They were arguing over a response to the strike where W. Thatcher Longstreth.
No.
That is a person's name. Was.
Can I rename my daughter? She's 3, but can I rename her? Because that is a goddamn good name. I fucked up on the first go, Gabe.
Before you do that, you should know that W. Thatcher Longstreth, as I'm sure you could tell by his name, was a Republican councilman at large and president of the Chamber of Commerce.
Makes sense.
Yeah.
Makes sense.
It's like, I feel like that name's kind of like the Dread Pirate Roberts, that when you become the president of the Chamber of Commerce, you just get renamed W. Thatcher Longstreth.
Yeah, there's only one trajectory for that gentleman.
Yeah. So he complained that the reason industry was leaving the city was Tate was too pro-labor. Surprisingly, though, Longstreth then got criticized by his own party, by the Republican Party of Philadelphia, for those comments.
Wow.
And another Republican council member was basically just like, he doesn't represent the views of this party.
Yes, he does.
Yeah.
Longstreth. Yes, he does.
Yes. Especially 1969. Well, actually, no. He wasn't racist enough for the 1969 Republican Party. So there weren't enough, like, by 69 they weren't explicitly using slurs. So there wasn't enough suggestion of slurs.
Oh man.
Uh,
Damn.
Otherwise, it would have been fully supported by the rest of the Republican council people. Okay,
Longstreth sounds like a slur.
It honestly, yeah. Also, it really bothered me that the name wasn't. It ends in TH.
Yeah.
Like there should be a C there. It should be TCH, but it's not. It's Eth. Yeah. And he's missing a T in Thatcher. It's THACHER.
Ew.
Yeah.
I don't like this guy anymore, Gabe.
Yeah.
I'll name my second kid after him.
Yeah. You know, every good Irish Catholic child should be named Thatcher. Okay, so while all of the negotiations were going on and city council was like recognizing that stuff happens in the city outside of city hall, the picket lines were still up at hotels around the city.
Yeah.
And management was suddenly discovering how hard all of their workers actually work.
Whoa.
Yeah.
Whoa, here we go.
So at the Penn Center Motor Inn, management had spent the weekend mopping, cleaning, and doing repairs around the hotel because they had a full house the next week. Visitors were starting to get annoyed with the lack of services, especially because prices hadn't changed. So you were still getting charged full price for going in and having to change your own linens.
Wow.
And like probably operate. Well, no, they'd had elevator operators still.
Yeah.
Oh,
okay.
But you didn't have a bar in the hotel anymore. You couldn't order room service. So you were basically paying for a light, a bathroom, and a bed. So people were a little pissed about that.
You had to bring your own bed bugs too.
Yeah.
Damn.
And your own mold if you wanted Legionnaire's disease. But the one supervisor, at least, spent the first 4 days of the strike without leaving the hotel. And he only went home on the 5th day to get a change of clothes.
Okay.
And but by Monday, October 6th, Mayor Tate forced both sides to sit down again because he was desperate to get this thing solved. So he called them back into his office for another long negotiation session. And after 9 hours, neither side was willing to budge at all.
Progress. It's still progress, Gabe.
Yeah, it's progress. The key is we're talking about it. That's the important part here. So for 3 days, from October 6th to October 9th, union leaders met directly with members of the hotel association in eye-to-eye negotiations, as Mayor Tate called it. And by the 3rd day, the union laid out a new offer that they would have the $80 an hour per week minimum, that's the $2 an hour minimum, because 40-hour week. Anyway, but they were willing to negotiate on minimum wages for skilled positions. So it was still setting a baseline of $2 an hour for everyone, but higher paid positions might not get as much of an increase.
Okay.
So,
all right.
The hotel owners took this proposal, discussed it internally for 2 hours, and then asked to adjourn for a day in order to discuss it further and come up with a counter proposal. At this point, the federal mediator, William Cherry, who must have been just like the most exasperated person in the world.
He's like, Jesus Christ, guys, come on.
Yeah, he's just been sitting in these meetings for almost 2 weeks now.
In Philadelphia.
In Philly, watching nothing happen. Honestly, I hadn't thought about this. I don't know, because I know there are like regional federal mediators. So I don't know if he lived in Philly or if he was staying in a hotel in Philly, in which case he would be even more pissed off.
Yeah, that might actually help him. Help the union's case at least.
Yeah. Anyway, so
I had to chop my own ice.
Yeah. So William Cherry was not happy with the negotiations, and so he seemed exasperated with the hotel owners not being willing to budge at all. The mayor was also getting annoyed with the hotel owners, because they had asked for the 2-day adjournment to discuss everything, and he was very reluctant to give that to them because they knew where the issue was this entire time, that the hotel owners needed to come back with an actual real offer that the union might be willing to accept.
Sure.
And so he told them, like, okay, you get this adjournment, but you have to actually come back with a legit offer. Otherwise,
something.
Yeah, like, we need to get this done. This was also, again, on the 9th. They had 4 days until 18,000 people were supposed to come and stay in these hotels.
Whoa.
Yeah. So he was freaking out.
Yeah.
So finally, after 10 days of striking, the Hotel Association came back with a proposal that union leadership felt was worth showing to members. And there was a lot of concern as to what was actually going to be in this package, because, again, a lot of people in Local 568 seemed frustrated with their leadership, and they definitely didn't trust the hotel owners. So Joseph, let me see if I can remember how to pronounce this. Gjep.
Did you pronounce it yet, Gabe?
I think so.
Okay. I don't know if that was a blip on the microphone or what.
Joey Mushrooms. He was a 60-year-old room service waiter at the Sheraton. When he was asked about whether or not he thought he would likely vote yes, he said, as long as the $2 minimum is accepted, we'll vote for it. Okay. Although we get tips, we know that they, meaning like maids, busboys, the more front of house workers that got worse pay, get slave wages and deserve a raise.
Yeah.
And I just wanted to highlight that because it was neat to see, like, both a higher paid, theoretically skilled position from an older worker too, but having solidarity with presumably mostly younger women workers.
Yeah.
And in the late 60s. Like, that's kind of cool to see.
I accidentally deleted the solidarity soundboard, but I would have played it there. So
that's what editing is for, Sam.
You're a crumb creep.
Is that your response to the guy that told you we need an editor? All right. In the end, the proposal that went out to membership had an immediate wage increase to $74 a week, then $80 a week in the next year.
Okay.
Then $84 a week the year after that.
All right.
So I will say this was better than the initial offer from the hotel, because they were offering an $80 week at the end of a 3-year contract.
Oh,
Yeah.
okay.
So they got they managed to get not a $4 or a $4 per week raise over the initial offer, but did have to compromise on the immediate $2 an hour raise.
Yeah.
But $74 a week is still like a $20 increase from what almost a $20 increase from what maids were making under the old contract. So
Yeah.
like that's nothing to
sneeze about.
Yeah. So in the evening of October 11th, union members voted 661 to 305 to accept the new contract.
Okay.
Yeah. So to like more than 2/3 majority.
Yeah.
That ended the strike at the 14 hotels of the Hotel and Motor Inn Association, which were all of the major ones in the city. But then there were a bunch of smaller hotels that were still in negotiations. But those, basically, they all relied on the major hotels for their bargaining power.
Yeah.
So once the big 14 went, that like Mom and Joe's Motor Inn isn't going to be able to hold out that long. So Mayor Tate was very supportive of the deal and showed that Philadelphia was a progressive city and that the wages of its workers reflected that.
Okay.
So again, like that very interesting period of Great Society Democrats in the 60s.
Yeah. I'm an LBJ guy.
Yeah. And we'll pay our workers well and bomb every other worker. And it's the American way.
That is the American way, Gabe.
Especially in the 60s. Now we just don't pay our workers well.
There we go.
Yeah. So within Local 568, Tony Cianfrani and the Committee for a Better Contract kept up their fight against Larry Stoltz. On October 17th, so about a week after the strike was up, they put out another half-page ad reminding them about, well, basically kind of taking credit in part for the wage increases because they were pressuring Stoltz and laying out that, like, for the past 27 years of his leadership, you haven't been getting good wages, which is why we needed this big strike.
Yeah.
And why we were demanding a 60-cent raise all of a sudden. Now, he also laid out that while most hotel workers were making like around what was it? It was around $75 to $100 a week. Some were making a little over $150 a week. President Stoltz was making like $400 a week, which probably pissed people off a little bit.
Yeah.
And not to like attack union leadership, which is a skilled position and deserves to be compensated as such, but like when you're making 4 times as much as the average worker in your union, you might, or as much as like the highest paid workers in the union, you should probably look into that. And have been in that position for 27 years. And Stoltz was also on the board of SEPTA and kept getting like, so I couldn't quite tell if he got ousted as president. I couldn't find any indication of that in the newspapers. But at some point, I want to do an episode on like rank and file caucuses in Philly and see if I can dive into, or see if I can find the records for these unions. It'd be interesting.
That'd be cool.
But
that'd be really cool.
It looks like from what I can tell, by the end of the 70s, Stoltz is still listed as a labor leader in Philly, but everything he's doing is like promoting Philadelphia as a place, or as like a pro-worker city, or he's the labor representative to the board
figurehead.
of SEPTA. Yeah.
Okay.
So I think he basically just got in with the politicos and was their token labor guy. But it doesn't seem like he's by like 1970, he's not listed as the president of Local 568 anymore.
Wow.
So I want to see what that election looked like, because I'm sure there were, again, judging by labor or internal labor union struggles in the 60s, I'm sure there was some shit going down in that election.
Oh yeah.
Maybe not sorry?
No, I was saying very much so. I think that'd be very interesting to dive into.
Yeah. And this was when Jock Yablonsky was getting murdered for running a rank and file movement to oust another entrenched union leader.
Yeah.
I don't think that I'd be very surprised if Local 568 was murdering anyone, but you never know.
Damn, Gabe.
To my knowledge, Local 568 no longer exists, because here is now Unite Here.
Mm-hmm.
And I will say, Unite Here 274, which represents hotel workers in Philly, they seem to be doing a good job.
Yeah.
And the Unite Here Philly has, especially like with all the Aramark workers and whatnot, they fought pretty hard. So
yeah, well, good on them. Rank and file leads the way, Gabe.
Yeah. And but yeah, so that was, getting back to our actual topic of this episode, that was the 1969 Philadelphia hotel workers strike.
Okay.
And I don't have anything else. What did we learn, Sam?
That I am from Barcelona.
Hey, this is Gabe, and thanks for listening to the Labor John podcast. So for now, we live in a system called capitalism. And under this system, you have to exchange currency for goods and or services. And to that end, Sam and I put a lot of time, effort, and a fair chunk of our own money into keeping this podcast available and generally free. And if you'd like to help support us doing that, you can give us some money at patreon.com/LaborJohn. And if you choose to do so, we'll give you a fancy button every year, some cool merch, and an extra episode once a month, whenever possible, because life is hard, because capitalism. Anyway, we'd really appreciate your support if you've got a few bucks to spare. Also, if you happen to be a member of a union and you want your fellow union members to learn about local labor history, we do commission work like presentations, pamphlets, that kind of stuff. So if that sounds cool, you can shoot us an email at laborjohn@gmail.com, or contact us through laborjohn.com, or message us on social media, or whatever's most convenient for you. But if that sounds interesting, feel free to reach out. And anyway, thanks for listening. Solidarity. Have fun.